Israel remains on edge after 2 full weeks of threatened attacks from the Islamic Republic and Hezbollah. The U.S.-led coalition against the Iranian threat on Israel has come together to confront the Islamic Republic amid a shared assessment in Washington and Jerusalem that the attack could come by the week's end. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has more.
With Israel poised for a potential attack from Iran, a full-blown war with Hezbollah, and the ongoing war in Gaza, Chief of Staff Halevi held an assessment and issued a brief statement emphasizing continuing high readiness for attack and defense.
אנחנו לוקחים ברצינות את ההצהרות והאמירות של אויבינו, ועל כן אנחנו ערוכים במוכנות שיא בהתקפה ובהגנה, ואנחנו נפעל על פי הנחיות הדרג המדיני.
The Air Force has increased patrols over Lebanon to detect and intercept threats. While preparing for war, the IDF spokesman said that there are still no changes to emergency guidelines for civilians. The IDF spokesman said the public will be updated as needed, but without giving our enemies any intelligence or operational advantage.
אנחנו עוקבים אחרי מה שקורה ספציפית מול איראן. עם כל היכולות שלנו, אנחנו גם לא עוקבים לבד. עוקבים עם ארצות הברית ועם שותפים נוספים. אני לא מכיר את הערכה הזו, ולא יודע להתייחס אליה באופן ספציפי, ואני עומד איתן סביב מה שאמרתי. אנחנו נעדכן את הציבור באופן מיידי.
With sources in Washington predicting that an Iranian attack on Israel could come by the end of the week, U.S. President Biden secured support from 4 key European allies. The White House announced that Washington shares Jerusalem's assessment that Iran and/or its proxies could launch the major attacks that they have threatened against Israel. According to senior officials in Washington, Iran has prepped its missile and drone units as it did before Tehran's attack on Israel in April. White House spokesman John Kirby said the coalition has prepared for what could be a significant set of attacks, and the U.S. has increased its regional force posture in recent days, including the deployment of the nuclear-powered USS Georgia, a guided missile submarine. The coalition leaders also endorsed a call from the U.S., Qatar, and Egypt for a renewal of mediated talks for a Gaza ceasefire agreement as soon as possible and urged parties to attend the Thursday talks in Doha. Israel announced it will attend. Hamas has not.
I believe that there has been headway made, but we need to finalize this agreement, continue to close and bridge some gaps. But we believe that an agreement is possible, and that's something that we're going to continue to work between the parties.
With the key hostage for ceasefire talks coming up on Thursday, some predict the Iranians may delay their attack until after the talks are held.
The IDF's remarkable assassination of Mohammed Deif turns out to have a more fascinating story of how the IDF discovered the whereabouts of the elusive terrorist leader. ILTV's Devo Klein has the full report.
In Gaza, the postman is more than just a postman, at least in times of war. After the successful assassination of Hamas's number 2 leader, Mohammed Deif, more details are emerging on how the IDF carried out the strike. The postman who delivered messages between Hamas leaders was the informant in Gaza who gave the IDF intel on the location and time of the meeting. Shortly thereafter, Deif was assassinated. This follows numerous attempts over the years to eliminate Deif by the IDF, which had all been unsuccessful until now. Reports indicate that the same informant had also provided the IDF with complete maps of Rafah, including the network of tunnels, weapons manufacturing facilities, explosives, missiles, and drones. The informant discovered Deif's location while delivering the Daily Mail and tipped off the IDF, who then instructed him to notify them when he sees Deif again. Over the years, Israel has gained a reputation for its daring and bold assassinations of terrorists. Deif's demise is clearly no exception, and yet another testament to the intelligence capabilities of the IDF. Although the world has assumed that Israel assassinated Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran at the end of July, Israel has still not yet claimed responsibility for the remarkable assassination that took place at an IRGC compound in Iran. This week, the commander of the IDF's 98th Division also stated that in addition to the assassination of Deif, The IDF was, quote, minutes away from capturing Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar in a Gaza tunnel. Sinwar has been at the top of Israel's list as he is the mastermind behind the October 7th massacre. If history proves to be true, however, it's only a matter of time before he is brought to justice by Israel.
As war rages on in Gaza, rockets and drones continue to infiltrate Israeli airspace from Lebanon, and the Islamic Republic promises to imminently attack Israel. Here with us to discuss the next steps is Dr. Mordechai Kedar of Bar-Ilan University. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Kedar. Always a pleasure to have you on. The most recent assessments from U.S. intelligence sources indicate the Iranian regime does intend to strike Israel in the coming days. How likely do you think this is, and what can we expect to see happen militarily from the regime?
They don't tell me, to tell you the truth. I have no idea, and your guess is as good as mine, because they have all kinds of possibilities. It could be by missiles, it could be by cruise missiles, it could be by drones. It could be even by incursion on the ground. As we saw in Gaza on October 7th, they can do whatever they like in order to say that they took revenge for the assassination, which they attribute to Israel of Haniyeh. So really, I have no idea. The question is what Israel will do, because if Israeli reply will be minor, they can get along with this. The problem is that if Israel will answer in a way which Israel did in Hudaydah, for example, means to destroy oil facilities, this can devastate the Iranian economy, because the Iranians are basing on the oil production in the Gulf. And if Israel attacks these facilities, they are in a deep problem. So I believe that the Israeli leadership knows its options. I believe that they also coordinate to a large degree with the United States, with the European countries. And I think that the problem is not only of Israel. Iran is a problem of the entire world, because Iran is involved in Ukraine. Iran is involved in Yemen, and jeopardizing the international commerce traffic in the seas. Iran is involved in terrorism all over the world. So the time is cometh that this regime will be put in its place by the civilized world before Israel.
You know, there's been a lot of discussion about a multi-pronged attack with the regime in Iran and Hezbollah or the Houthis working together. Can Israeli defense technology actually prevent a severe strike by all of these actors simultaneously? Do we have those defense capabilities?
Well, always defense is never hermetic. Always defense could be 90%, 95%, even a bit more. But if they send a barrage of missiles to Israel, to say that all those missiles will be intercepted, I think it will be irrealistic or some kind of a miracle. But yes, we have to take in account that if you are attacked, you might be hit here and there. This is why, in my humble view, the best defense is attack or deterrence.
You know, in the event that a strike does occur, what would be the goal of the Islamic Republic with this? I mean, some people are saying that they are positioning themselves for an all-out war. Others are saying it's more posturing and ego. What can we expect to see? A more limited strike or a more severe strike? I know you mentioned already they can do whatever they like, but what are you anticipating?
It's all the above. The motivations is a salad of motivations. First of all, they want to get rid of Israel altogether. This is their main goal. This is why they run in the streets and they chant death to Israel, death to America, by the way, as well. And they don't mean death to Israel, that Israel should, let's say, leave Jerusalem only. Israel should leave the Middle East or to leave the world altogether. So this is the main goal. On the way, since they cannot get rid of Israel entirely, now they can attack Israel in order to weaken Israel and to frighten Israel and to strike terror into the hearts of the Israelis. This is they can do, and they do actually, with a whole scheme of militias which they implanted all over the Middle East, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen. Gaza also is part of their proxies. So yes, this is how they try to devastate the life of the Middle East. By the way, the cost is a hell of a high price of Arab lives in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Gaza, in Yemen, because Persians, as you might know, couldn't care less about Arabs' lives.
Absolutely right. They're actually the biggest murderer of Arab Muslims in the region. A lot of people don't realize this. There has been some speculation that perhaps Israel is preparing to preemptively strike. As you mentioned, the best deterrence is an offense. I'm wondering, what could we expect to see in a preemptive strike, and how do you think that international allies such as the United States might respond to a preemptive strike by Israel?
No, I've absolutely no knowledge about what Israel is preparing. I have less knowledge about what the United States is preparing. For this, you have to ask Netanyahu on one side and maybe somebody in the American administration on the other side.
All right. Well, thank you for your analysis and for your time, Dr. Kedar. Thank you, as always, for coming on.
Thank you so much.
More violence in the territories as the IDF troops entered Qalqilia, where they tracked down and killed a Palestinian terrorist who shot and wounded an Israeli man who entered the town to get his car fixed. The terrorist opened fire at the victims near a car repair shop in Qalqilia, seriously wounding him. 2 Palestinians standing next to him were also wounded. Troops launched a pursuit after the terrorists, and he was found and killed just outside of town. The terrorist was later named as 18-year-old Tariq Daoud. The IDF says it has no intel to confirm or deny the Hamas claim that its guards killed 1 Israeli male hostage and severely wounded 2 female hostages in separate incidents. More in the following report.
The IDF related to the Hamas claim that its guards killed an unnamed male hostage and wounded 2 female Israeli hostages, saying it has no intel to confirm or deny the Hamas claim. The captors say they are investigating what they claim was 2 separate incidents. Without providing proof, Hamas spokesman Abu Obaida issued a statement blaming Israel for the incidents and says that efforts are being made to save the wounded Israeli captives. The army said, "We are continuing to check and investigate the credibility of the statement and will update as soon as possible with any information we have." At the beginning of the war, Abu Obaida threatened to execute Israeli hostages and release footage of the killings. Israel has previously dismissed Hamas's statements on the deaths of hostages as deplorable psychological warfare.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump took part in a 2-hour conversation on X with SpaceX CEO Elon Musk to discuss a variety of topics that have come up in the Trump campaign, along with current events. Let's take a look at what Trump had to say about Israel and the Jewish community.
A radical left lunatic who's far more left than Bernie Sanders. That's how former President Trump described his political opponent, Kamala Harris, during his 2-hour conversation with Elon Musk. Trump continued on to condemn Harris for her anti-Israel stance and appointment of Governor Tim Walz as her running mate, whom he described as an anti-Israel radical left person. On the Jewish community, Trump stated, "If you are a Jewish person, or if you are a person that is very pro-Israel, if you vote for Kamala, she's worse than Biden, and Biden was bad. But if you vote for her, you ought to have your head examined." In the preceding comments, Trump elaborated, explaining that he believes Harris and Walz are bad for Israelis and Palestinians alike, even adding that Biden did accomplish one remarkable thing, making both sides hate him. On Iran, Trump claimed the regime has no respect for the U.S. due to the lack of leadership, and stressed the dangers of an Islamic regime attack on Israel, speaking candidly against the axis of evil, Iran, China, Russia, and North Korea. Throughout the conversation, Trump again emphasized that October 7th would never have happened had he been president, and said he would deal with Iran by cracking down on sanctions, even demanding China stop buying Iranian oil if they seek to do business with the U.S. Reactions to the conversation have been mixed across social media, with some users so irritated they claimed they were leaving the platform. Others applauded Trump and Musk, both for a detailed, in-depth conversation on a wide range of topics, both political and apolitical.
With the threat of a war in northern Israel looming, many residents have been evacuated and have been advised to stock up on groceries and any other necessities. However, this isn't as easy for some as it is for others, and we are seeing many families becoming desperate at this time. Yad Ezra Shulamit is doing all they can to ensure those families are supported, and you can help too by scanning the QR code on the screen. With me now is Fleur Hassan Nahum to hear more about what they are doing. Fleur, thanks so much for being with us, first of all. I'm wondering if you can describe the current situation in northern Israel and how this looming threat of war is affecting the residents there, many of whom have been out of their homes for 10 months.
Well, absolutely. Let's start with that. There's been almost 70,000 people displaced from their homes in the north of Israel, across the country. Many of them have come to Jerusalem, actually, and we've been hosting them in Jerusalem in all sorts of situations. But imagine also, Emily, people lost their businesses, people lost their jobs. And so there's a lot of people right now who are not just tense about an attack that may come, but they know how much they will suffer themselves with probably electricity, lack of water, and all sorts of things that happen when a main attack like that comes. And this is what everybody's waiting for right now.
Now, we mentioned the challenges for those who have already been struggling. How does the current crisis exacerbate the difficulties for the poor and also those who are facing new challenges, such as these evacuees and the families of those who are enlisted in the army?
Well, exactly. When you have a situation such as war, it's always the most vulnerable that suffer the most. And this is what we're seeing here, that we have people who were vulnerable to begin with, and now they're really on the edge. And we have people who weren't vulnerable, have lost their businesses and have lost their jobs and have lost their homes and their livelihoods for the time being. And so it's really not a great situation for people who are the most needy and the most vulnerable.
Could you tell us a little more about how Yad Ezra Shulamit is mobilizing its resources to meet this increased demand for food aid, and what infrastructure is in place to support these efforts?
So I know this organization because they've been working for many, many years with the very vulnerable and the very poor. And as you know, Jerusalem has a lot of very vulnerable and very poor families. So I know them from when I was deputy mayor of Jerusalem and the good work that they've been doing. Today, of course, they put their focus on where the country most needs it, and that is in the north of the country. And I know that they are the biggest distributors of food basket in the country. They have 93 different distribution points around the country. They have 12,000 food baskets that they give away every week. And they have all these trucks that they deploy around the vulnerable communities. And really, they're the people who are providing that type of supplies of food that the most vulnerable need.
Now, Fleur, you've painted a vivid picture of the daily realities that are faced by those in need. I'm wondering if you could share a specific story or an example that perhaps illustrates the urgent need for support during this crisis.
Well, you hear stories every day of the hungry, of the newly hungry, of kids going to bed hungry. And that is a situation that is not acceptable in the state of Israel today. And this is why our civil society have really stepped up to the plate in so many ways. And Yad Ezra Shulamit is really one of those leading organizations that are making sure that kids are not going to bed hungry.
As we wrap up, could you just reiterate to our viewers how they can help? I mean, what are the most immediate needs for these Israelis who are in need, and how can donations actually make a direct impact right now?
Well, people can buy food baskets for the needy. People can buy, communities can buy a truck. A truck with full of food supplies is $26,000. And so there's many ways, if there are people out there who see the need and would like to feed the hungry in Israel, and the hungry that have grown, those numbers have grown because of the war, then there's really no better organization than Yad Ezra Shulamit to help those vulnerable.
Absolutely. Well, Fleur, thank you so much for joining us today and for speaking about this important initiative that is working on the ground to help, of course, the soldiers who are on the front lines and their families who are struggling, as well as the evacuees from the north and any other Israelis in need. Thank you so much, Fleur.
Thank you.
Now, although there are no plans to close Ben Gurion Airport now, the Jerusalem Post has reported that in a prolonged attack scenario, operations could shift to Ramon Airport near Eilat under what is being dubbed the Silver Wings Plan. Ramon Airport, despite experiencing some rocket attacks and debris from intercepted rockets and UAVs, is deemed safer than Ben Gurion due to the destruction of Hamas's long-range rockets and the presence of Iron Dome and aero defense systems. In a crisis, operations can shift to Ramon with a 12-hour notice, according to the report. And with the Israel-Hamas war ongoing and tensions escalating in the north, the Israeli economy has naturally taken a hit. Let's go to ILTV correspondent Ariella Lahiani, who has more information.
Yes, Emily. So credit ratings agency Fitch has downgraded Israel's credit rating from A+ to A, citing worsening geopolitical risk as the Israel-Hamas war wages on. And they've actually kept the ratings outlook as negative, which means a further downgrade is very much possible. This comes as the Israeli shekel has weakened by 1.7% against the US dollar, and stocks have also lowered by 1% in Tel Aviv, as investors, quite frankly, have become hesitant to invest into the Israeli economy at this time. This obviously is all amid the looming Iranian attack and fears of an all-out regional war, which could very possibly then mean more money into the military, damage infrastructure and damage economic activity. However, Finance Minister Smotrich has reaffirmed that this is normal, this is expected in any given war, and that he is putting steps into place to make sure the Israeli economy bounces back and resumes as usual.
They deny the kidnapping of our children, the murder of our grandchildren, the rape of our daughters. The new Nazis we face today will stop at nothing to destroy civilization as we know it. The World Jewish Congress was created exactly for these times like this, so every Jew can fall asleep at night knowing they are safe in their own home. We are a voice for the Jewish people everywhere. We are the World Jewish Congress.
Well, an earthquake struck central Syria late Monday with tremors felt in northern Israel, Lebanon, and Jordan. Syria's National Center for Earthquakes recorded it at a magnitude of 5.5, while the U.S. Geological Survey reported it as a 5.0 magnitude quake with a depth of 10 kilometers. In Israel, Magen David Adom confirmed there were no reports of injuries or damage from the quake. For Syrians, however, the quake likely triggered memories of the devastating 7.8 magnitude earthquake in 2023 that claimed over 50,000 lives, mostly in Turkey, but also in Syria, and of course caused widespread destruction. And now let's take